So one of the viewers that watched our video, A-list actors forced to wear dresses, left me the question, what about John Wayne? I had said in the video that I found like 90% or like 95% of all A-list actors I looked up played a woman at some point in their career, were forced to dress up as a woman as some sort of a ritual, so some sort of occult ritual like a hazing. Talk about that quite extensively in the video. You can go check that out if you haven't seen it already. What I basically found that is if you Google an actor's name with in drag or in a dress, you pretty much find out that at some point in the career they look like they were forced to wear a dress. This happens over and over again, not just with actors, but with politicians and athletes. It's pretty much across the board. Then I found a few people like Jack Nicholson, who never wore a dress, and he has dressed up. He has played the devil, like I believe 2 or 3 times, or devil-like characters 2 or 3 times in his career. So that's another avenue where a person might be forced to or voluntarily choose the devil option over wearing a dress. As far as I can tell, this is a 100% type ritual scenario. Like in a gang, people can get sexed in or they can get beaten in to the gang. They can fight their way in or they can have sex with some of the gang members. So there's this various ways that people get into a gang, get into one of these occult ritualistic type organization. It's pretty well known now that these occult type organizations, the Illuminati, Freemasonic organizations, satanic organizations, control Hollywood, control the money system, the monetary system. And if you want to make it to be a big time star, you have to, in some way, sell your soul to the devil, and you have to go through these various ritualistic type behaviors and activities, these various forms of hazings, going up in the various levels in the organization. You have to, in some way, make your peace with the evil nature of these organizations, and you got to bow down to them. And one of the ways that you are asked to submit is to wear a dress. If you're a male person, is to wear a dress. It's become much more prevalent, which I discovered while making another video. There's a lot of power and money and energy behind this movement of making women more masculine, making women more like a warrior type person, and then emasculating the men and making them more feminine. If you start looking for the pattern, it's easy to see. If you watch any kind of TV show, any kind of movie, any kind of music video, in politics and athletics, you'll see this phenomenon. Just look for it in anything that you're doing when you're reading the news. Anything that you're doing, just look for it. You'll be easy. It's easy to detect this pattern. And so this person said, "What about John Wayne?" And I thought, well, probably it doesn't go that far back. I know Burt Lancaster wore a dress in a movie back in I believe in the 40s or 50s or 60s, and this was a theme that was even in play back then. I know there were several comedians that were in drag, so this was something that was going on back then. It wasn't as prevalent, but I looked into it, and there was John Wayne in drag. It's from a black and white movie called The Spoilers. I believe it was made in the 1940s, and very interesting theme. And I'm going to break that down in just a second. But I took some screenshots of it, and I was going to include these pictures in I had a little piece to do in the video called "We Are All Trained Actors and Liars," and I completely slipped my mind. I didn't remember to put it in the video. I didn't even remember about the pictures. Then I came across them while I was making another video. I was like, well, I just make a 5 minute video on this. I'll make a 5 to 7 minute video. It's been on my mind for a number of weeks to do this, and I really want to emphasize how much these videos are a product of not only my experiences and my thoughts, but even more so, it's about channeled or connecting with spirit, connecting to the God within. I talk about a lot in my videos how I meditate for at least an hour a day, connecting to like the spirit world, the positive spirit world, connecting with the higher forces, with the divine forces. Somebody just today left a comment in one of my videos saying that it was a Christian viewer, and they said that the Holy Spirit's really speaking through you. Now this is something that everybody can do. We all have a relationship with this spiritual world, just like we have our relationships with the insects that are around and in our house, just like we have a relationship with various species, with various trees and plant life that's in our neighborhood. We're breathing in the oxygen that the trees are making. The trees are feeding off our carbon dioxide. We're all influencing each other. We're all connected. And there's these spiritual levels of existence, and all of us have some sort of relationship with these beings that inhabit these worlds, that inhabit these other dimensions, whether they're negative spiritual influences like demonic forces or they're positive influences like angelic forces. We are still in contact with them, and we're influenced by whatever spiritual energies around us, just like we know now that there are germs. We all know that there are germs. They have an influence, microscopic animal life that's been discovered that has an influence on all of our bodies. There are microbes, microscopic germs that live inside our bodies that outnumber our cells in volume 10 to 1. They're much smaller than our human cells. But the microbes in our body, which are foreign life, it's an alternative life form. It's a different life form that's inside our bodies. And this affects our moods, this affects our attitudes, this affects our health, and they outnumber our human cells 10 to 1. So here's the interesting thing. This video has been on my mind to make just a short 5 or 7 minute video about John Wayne and him wearing a dress and just this interesting stuff I discovered when looking at this movie, this old time movie. And then it just got pushed back and delayed. I had a lot of things I had to do. I couldn't make this movie. And the next thing I know, I find out that there's Will Smith's son, Jaden Smith, is wearing a dress. I do a little research into that, and that balloons out into Will Smith and his attitudes and his some of the things he's done in terms of wearing dresses, and then his daughter's behavior, and then this whole idea just ballooned out from there. And then a couple days ago, Bruce Jenner gives an interview where he says that he is a woman trapped in a man's body. He's a transgender person, and all of these things tied together, and you can really see the pattern. I'm really going to break this down. It's really easy to see these patterns, how all these things are tied together, and how there's an agenda here. This is what makes it interesting and makes it something that we have to be wary of. Because if some guy just wants to put on a dress, that's really his business. Who really cares about it? But the powers that be are really pushing this agenda out. Like I talked about in A-list actors, or the 95% chance that Michelle Obama is a man. I can't remember which video. But I talk about how only 0.003 or 0.03% of people are transgender type people. It's something like 3 out of 1,000, a very small percentage compared to all these other types of issues that are out there. People who are homeless, people who are starving, people who are dying in wars all over the world. All these horrible things are going on. And yet the money and the power and the influence and the media coverage of the transgender issue, it's just always in your face all the time. And so this is why it's something that we have to be aware of, because there's something going on here. We are being messed with, not just in terms of this issue, with GMO foods, with poison in our water like fluoride. Our minds are just getting messed with all the time with all these Illuminati hand signals, all this Illuminati type symbolism. And so when you watch this video, I want people to look for a couple of things, something in terms of pattern recognition. All my videos are about pattern recognition to one extent or another. It's something that I specialize in. It's just something that I like to do and like to point out. And in terms of the patterns that are going on here, I want people to look for, first of all, rituals. Now, rituals are something that we really don't pay attention to. I didn't pay attention to for many, many years. And there's so many things that are rituals, whether they be like, say, for example, like a celebrity roast. That's a ritual. That's some sort of sacrificial ritual. We all know about Bohemian Grove, but there's also rituals in all of these award ceremonies. And then there's ritualistic behavior that people are involved in. Ritualistic behavior in terms of cliques that you have in your high schools. And you can see ritualistic behavior and rituals in every TV show, in all these athletic ceremonies that go on, like the Olympic Games, the introduction to the Olympic Games. There's always some ritualistic type activities. Some of these things are Freemasonic. Some of the things that are just things that people have evolved into, that we do rituals every day. Like athletes perform rituals, pre-game rituals and superstitious rituals. I think most people have some sort of superstition they have in their life, something they might be scared of, and they might perform a ritual to compensate, to make them feel more secure in doing something that makes them feel anxiety or makes them feel a little bit nervous. And what we have here is that all of these organizations, these dark organizations, these satanic organizations, even religious organizations, everybody wants you to see their rituals. Everybody wants you to be a part of their rituals. There's power in these rituals. There's reasons that people do these rituals. There's reasons that people have done things like human sacrifice and done these horrible things, because there's power in it. There's control in it. It gives people influence. It gives them supernatural powers. It gives them the ability to manifest things like wealth and power and longevity of life. All these types of things that they do. So everybody wants you to get involved in their rituals, whether you know it or not, or whether you're aware that you're actually watching a ritual. So that's why you see all of these rituals on TV. That's why you see all of these hazings, all of these types of these things that people have, initiates have to go through to get into a Freemasonic type situation or a satanic organization. They want you to see this. They want you to go through these rituals, whether it's just in your mind or whether you're playing a video game where you're actively involved in the ritual, and they want you to imitate these behaviors, and they want to make them normal. And some of this stuff is just, like I said, they're messing with us. We're experiments. We're all involved in this big experiment. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on in the video. And the second thing I want people to look for, and that is agenda. What's the agenda here? Why would they do this? What's the motivation? Why are they grooming us for something? What are they grooming us for? What's the reason behind, for example, making all A-list celebrities wear dresses? What is the end game here? What's the final payoff? And you can see these things because you see the patterns repeating themselves, and you can see that there's a hidden agenda here. All right, so let's get into it. Here's John Wayne in his 1942 movie, The Spoilers. And it's a really bad movie. It's a poorly acted movie. It's a horrible script. I only scanned through it. It was just really, really bad. But the part that he wears a dress starts off with him going into black, wearing blackface, putting on black makeup and pretending to be a black person, which he does really horribly, and it's really, really racist. And this woman who plays the overweight black maid, a very stereotypical character that you've seen in these old-time movies, it's just a very racist scene. You have to basically watch it. It's up there on YouTube. You can see the timing from the screenshots when this scene takes place. But anyway, he goes and puts on blackface, and he went and with some other guys and stole back some money that was his or something like that. And then from there, he got some of the blackface on his coat, and so this woman offered to clean it for him. She was going to clean the blackface stuff off of his coat. She was going to clean the makeup off of the coat, and he went off to clean himself up. And then the sheriff comes into this basically whorehouse. It's a whorehouse, a cat house. And Marlena Dietrich, I believe, is the actress's name that plays the lead, the other lead. She's the head madam of this cat house. And the sheriff comes in looking for John Wayne character, looking for the John Wayne character. She brings him up to her room where John Wayne is hiding, and then there's John Wayne. He's taken off his coat and his clothes that had the makeup on them, but he's still wearing an undergarment, like a long sleeve t-shirt. You see those all the time in these old time westerns. And he's wearing on top of that this prostitute's robe, these sort of fluffy, feathery type prostitute robes. And it's not funny. This isn't a funny scene. I can't see where somebody would laugh at this. and it goes on for quite some time. So here he is playing, first of all, an African American type person, and then he goes right from being an African American, someone, a white person wearing blackface, into a dress. So this is a constant theme we see out there from Dave Chappelle talking about it, how African American actors are constantly being emasculated and having to put on dresses as part of this occult ritual. And I talk about this in this A-list actors movie and how it's not just African American, as there's obviously so many A-list white actors that also have had to put on a dress. But I've come to find out that both are the case, and I'll get into that in a little bit. That it's both white and black male actors having to be emasculated and wear dresses, but they're really pushing to over the top in an over the top way emasculate black actors. But going back to John Wayne, it's a really odd scene with him. He's eating a hard-boiled egg with wearing this dress. It's a really poor acted scene, but again, it's not really funny. No reason for this to take place, just that they've written it into the script. Now, I get a lot of comments in the A-list actors video where people say, well, they're not forced to do this. Maybe a lot of them want to play women. Maybe a lot of them like this type of role. Maybe a lot of them just willingly did it. But do you think that 99% or 95% or even 80% of all actors get a script and they say, oh man, I really hope I get to wear a dress in this movie? I hope they really have a drag scene in this movie. Or do you think it's like Dave Chappelle talked about when he was describing when they tried to get him to wear a dress in a movie, that the actors get the script and them wearing a dress isn't a part of it? That when they show up to do the movie and they're on set and they say, we have a new scene and here, put on your dress. That's what Dave Chappelle said happened to him. And don't you think that's a lot more likely that all of these actors were already signed on to do a movie and their producer of the movie and their agent and all their handlers are pressuring them and say, yeah, it'll be funny, it'll be great. All the greats have done it, like Dave Chappelle had said. So it's probably the latter, that they show up and they have to wear a dress because there's all this peer pressure. They're in the middle of a shoot, and this is how they get this done. All right, so now let's take a look at Jaden Smith, and this is where you have an intergenerational type situation of men in drag, something that Will Smith had to do, and now his son Jaden Smith has to do. It's something that's being passed on from father to son in a sense. And this is where you're really getting into these ritualistic type long-term behaviors, sending a consistent message out to our subconscious as well as our conscious minds. They're making this behavior more and more normal. They're normalizing this type of behavior, saying, yeah, this is something where men dress up as women is just a normal type activity. So when we look at what can be considered bizarre behaviors from Will Smith and his children, Jaden and Willow Smith, we're not only keeping in mind we're looking for rituals, we're looking for ritualistic type behavior, but we're also looking for something I talk about quite extensively in We're All Trained Actors and Liars. That all of these A-list celebrities, all of these famous people are acting all the time. This is one giant role that they're playing, that they're asked to play. When they sign on this, when they sign away their life, when they sign their soul to the devil for fame and fortune, all of their lives, whether it be their celebrity relationships they're in, everything that they do is scripted. Every aspect of their lives has an agenda. They have a reason. They're selling us something. So it's not just in terms of movies and TV shows and music videos, but it's every aspect of their lives. So very recently, Jaden Smith has been seen in various places wearing dresses. Now you can say, all right, this is just a high school kid choosing to be trendy, choosing to be fashionable. But remember, he's an A-list celebrity. They are a brand. They are a marketable commodity. They are basically owned. It's a form of wealthy slavery. They're very wealthy slaves, all of these types of people, all of these types of celebrities. Every article of clothing they wear, every political stand or statement they make, everything that they say in an interview is scripted. Even though some of it's going to be spontaneous, they are trained, just like a presidential candidate is trained what to say in a debate, what not to say. They say if you're asked this question, this is what you say. Of course, there's going to be mess ups, screw ups. There are going to be some gaffes, some political gaffes. The celebrity's going to go off script, those types of things. But for the most part, they are completely handled, completely managed. They have a huge team, a team of handlers, of trainers, of managers, of publicists, of stylists, and everything that they do is already pre-planned and pre-programmed. So Jaden Smith is told, go up there and start wearing dresses, start making a fashion statement. So this is just a small thing. I was going to slap it on to the back of the John Wayne video, and then I saw a comment while I was doing some screenshots by Will Smith, and this is how all of these things evolve. These are how all these things become more and more inclusive, and more information prevents itself. So first of all, here's the report of what Jaden Smith, what they said Jaden Smith. So again, they're going to do a press release. There's going to be some sort of written material. There's going to be some quotes, and maybe they're not directly attributed to Jaden Smith, but his publicist and his agents say, yes, this is what he thinks, this is what he says. So they're basically sort of hearsay, but they're out there. And it says, it's really hard to believe that people actually take this seriously when you read it. It's actually really insulting to all of our intelligence. So this is an article from this magazine, this online magazine called HollywoodLife.com. When Jaden was pictured wearing a dress, some questioned his fashion sense. However, HollywoodLife.com has exclusively learned that the actor is just super trendy, who is brave enough to wear high-end fashions. Get all the details. And then it goes on to say, calm down, he's just trying to stay hip. Jaden Smith, 16, stepped out on April 9th wearing girls' clothes, and the whole world wondered why. Well, HollywoodLife.com has exclusively found out that the Karate Kid actor is crazy for men's high fashion, in particular, dresses that male macho stars like Kanye West like to wear. Sister Willow, 14, even borrows clothes sometimes, and his parents, Will, 46, and Jada, 43, totally approve. It's kind of funny, but really it's just really, really sad. I mean, our children, this next generation of children, their minds are just basically going to turn to mush. It goes on from there. So there's a lot more information than probably anybody really cares about. But here's what's really interesting about this. The next headline going down further on the page, it says, Jaden Smith wearing dresses, how Will and Jada feel about it. Will and Jada are definitely two of the best, most progressive parents in Hollywood. HollywoodLife.com learned exclusively that Will and Jada aren't bothered at all by Jaden's trendy decision to wear dresses. Will and Jada have their own arguments about their kids and some of their choices they make, but they are both on board when it comes to Jaden's fashion choices, a source told HollywoodLife.com. So who is this unnamed source? Who is this unnamed source that is just basically passing on hearsay to this magazine? I don't know who's writing this. It sounds like it's almost like a child who's writing this thing, but it's probably like some 65-year-old guy who's writing this stuff for 13 and 14 and 15-year-old kids. But again, there's no real attributable comment here. It's not like someone's directly quoting Will and Jada Smith. It looks like just one of their mind control type situations where they're rolling out a scripted movement and everybody is just supposed to knuckle under. So what's really bad about this is all of these young children are basically being subjected to things that aren't happening spontaneously, that have just been completely managed by the CIA and all these dark organizations that roll out these scenarios. So it's something that's incredibly dangerous. It's not like anybody is really doing this. This is happening organically. So it goes on from there. A source told Hollywood.com exclusively, again, who is this source that won't be named? I mean, what's their risk here? What is this person going to say? This is obviously a press release. This is being managed. The kid is wearing dresses publicly to public events. He wants to be seen wearing a dress. who's gonna lose their jobs? Who's gonna get persecuted for giving their name to this to be an attributable source? A secret source that's scared to give their name told this incredibly teeny bopper web magazine exclusively. They are so used to it by now that it doesn't bother them at all. They like his choices and think he looks pretty cool. What do you think, Hollywood Lifers? Does Jaden look good in a dress? Let us know. Signed, John Boone. I guess he's the author. Now, even this is contradictory. Now, they've quoted this person, but they say that they're used to it by now, and yet they think they like his choices and it's pretty cool. The two statements contradict each other. The reason I put everybody through this is actually it gets much worse because I read this other quote and then I went back and combed this article and found this contradiction. And this is a quote from Will Smith about how Jaden Smith is a complete minimalist. And this came out on February 12th, 2015. And this thing about Jaden wearing a dress is just 2 months later in April of 2015. So within 2 months, you have a complete different story. And this is a direct quote from Will Smith. Jaden, my 16-year-old son, he has one pair of shoes, Smith admitted. He has 3 pairs of pants and he has 5 shirts. He has refused to be a slave to money. I so respect that. It's such an interesting thing to watch because I came from a middle class background. Our lights and gas would be cut off from not paying the bill, and he's from the complete other end of the spectrum. And it's so interesting to me that from growing up in that space, he could see the need for things in a way that he's rejecting. He's like, I'm not going to let myself need things in that way, Smith continued, before adding, but I would like him to get another pair of shoes. So here he is selling his son as a complete minimalist, not a trendy guy, not a guy who wears dresses, someone who just wants to buy the bare minimum, just a few pair of pants, just a few shirts. He doesn't say anything about the kid's got a closet full of dresses. So when did this huge turnabout happen? In just 2 months' time. So here you have complete contradictory stories, and that's where you get into this idea of mind control. This is where you can see that they have just changed the script. They gave Will Smith one script about his family. This is how your family is. This is how your son is. His publicity team put out this statement. He's saying, all right, this is the kind of kid my son is. He's a minimalist. He's somebody who's not into materialism. He's a down-to-earth guy. Even though he's grown up in complete opulence, he's like me. He's a middle-class Joe like me. He's just trying to live a simple life. And then 2 months later, they go, hey, put your kid in a dress. And then they throw the kid out in a dress. And there's a complete different story that they're trying to sell everybody. If you're some 14 or 15-year-old person and you read these two things, your mind is mush anyway. You've been on the internet for 7.5 hours a day, and you're just like, all right, whatever. But this is how they're messing with people. And then it goes a little bit deeper. Then I went back and said, what about Will Smith? What has he had to do? I know that he had to play a gay character in 6 Degrees of Separation, but I was like, was he ever in drag? And then I found something that I thought was a little bit disturbing. If you Google Will Smith in drag, you come up with 3 things. You come up with a couple of scenes from that show, that really horrible show, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and he's fantasizing about his rap partner. I believe the guy's name was Jazzy Jeff, and he's fantasizing about him dressed up like a woman. And then there's a scene from The Fresh Prince, not a scene, it's a whole episode, where Chris Rock has to play a woman. There's a lot of pictures of that on the internet. But the other thing was from the movie Wild Wild West, which is a remake from a television show that I used to watch as a kid. Very occultish television show. I bet if I went back and watched it, you'd find a ton of occult symbolism. At some point, I'm going to watch this movie with Will Smith again because I can just see from the scene that I saw that it's very ritualistic and there's just a ton of occult symbolism. In this scene, Will Smith dresses up like, I guess, some sort of Middle Eastern belly dancer, and he's over and over again he's flashing the devil horns and other Illuminati satanic type hand signals. It starts off with him having these two towers next to him, a very it looks like very much of an altar as he comes out, and these guys are all sitting behind him. It's very ritualistic in nature. And then he really works it. He really works this belly dancer thing. The scene goes on for 2 minutes. There's a clip of it on YouTube, and I'll post a link in the description box. I think it's something interesting for everybody to take a look at. But he's really working this sort of stripper belly dancer type thing. He sits on guys' lap. He's really sexually provocative as a woman, and I really think they put him through hell. I mean, this is something that you don't see so much. A lot of these times, these A-list actors, they have a few minute scenes. They have to get up, don on some, put on a dress, give a little high-pitched voice, and then they get out of there. But he's really has to sexualize himself as a woman. Again, maybe this is this idea of black actors having it a little tougher. They have to be emasculated just a little bit more than the white A-list actors. Will Smith is a huge celebrity. This is just something he had to go through to make it to that upper level. You see there's a lot of African American athletes and celebrities that go to these high levels, and they have to have a blood sacrifice. They have to have a relative killed or murdered or something like that. Maybe Will Smith took this as a lesser of two evils. Who's to say? Who's to say what really goes on behind these closed doors? The thing about it is, I saw this movie, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, 15, I remember basically nothing about it. But I saw this scene, and I just at the time had no reaction. I had no idea about conspiracy theories. I saw this long before 9/11 even happened. I had no idea about any of this stuff. I had never even heard the term Illuminati. I was just completely clueless like most people. So here was just another scene where with some male actor dressing up as a woman. I'd seen it 100 times in various movies, and you just don't think about it. You don't care. I don't care. I don't care if they put Will Smith in a dress. It wasn't funny. The scene wasn't funny. It's not funny now. I'm sure it wasn't funny then. But I didn't care. It doesn't matter to me. None of this stuff matters to me. People being transvestites, people being transgender, but there's an agenda here. You can see that they are pushing this stuff. They've been pushing it for years, and now it's become an intergenerational phenomenon among these celebrities. You see Will Smith having to put on this dress, having to really work it, having to really turn into a woman to be effeminized, and then his son has to wear a dress in public. And wearing a dress itself isn't the problem. The fabric isn't the problem. The cloth isn't the problem. There are many cultures around the world. Where I am now in India, there's men who wear a dhoti. That's some of the traditional dress that men do. A dhoti is basically a dress for a man. So it isn't this type of situation, because that's what men do here. So it isn't the dress itself that's the problem. It's what it means and what it means to other generations. And why are they doing this? Why are they pushing this so forcefully down our throats constantly? This idea of transgender people, this idea of transvestites, why they're making women into warriors, and why they're making men more and more effeminized. I talk about this more extensively in other videos. I talk about it in terms of transhumanism. I'm going to make a follow-up video about transhumanism and the transhumanist model, when the people who get their minds uploaded to computers are no longer going to have a sex, and they're going to be very much like characters in a video game, where you'll play a female character sometimes, where you play a male character sometimes. We see that being pushed out in video games now quite extensively. You see a lot of people, their avatar is female or male depending on their mood. And so you're going to see this type of thing where they're going to get rid of the sexual orientation of a person, where they're going to try to blend it into one type of a unisex human being, where you're no longer going to reproduce. We talked about them developing the artificial womb and all of this endgame stuff, and I'm going to talk about that more extensively in the transhumanist video follow-up that I'm going to make in the future. But here right now, in talking about Will Smith, here he is having to put on a dress. He's been through this stuff for many years. He's had to sell himself out for many years. Again, I don't have anything against Will Smith. I've watched a lot of his movies. I think a lot of his movies are great. I've enjoyed a lot of his movies, at least before I started to look behind the scenes and look for these various patterns. But here's this guy who's been through all of this kind of traumatic stuff, this emasculating stuff. And not only does he not stop and just take the money and run, or maybe he can't do this, but he's so engrossed in this, and he's so owned by this satanic machine that runs Hollywood. He's got to sell not only his son out, but also his daughter, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes. But he's been through this himself, and now he's saying, well, you got to go out there and wear a dress too. So there's this emasculation, this emasculating type scenario playing itself out in two generations of the Smith family on a public stage, where not only he's been emasculated and he's got to play this kind of type of role, but then he's going to have his son do this, and his parents are of course going to back it because they have to follow the script. Because the other end of the spectrum, what happens when you don't follow the script is pretty brutal. So of the two evils, they're going to follow the script. They get to keep their position, they get to keep their wealth and power, and they get to live in this fantasy world, this movie, their life becomes a movie, and there's going to be some unpleasant turns to this reality TV show, and this is one of them, where his son is going to get emasculated. But then there's this stuff with Will Smith's daughter. Again, this stuff is always so much like a spider's web. So I was doing this kind of research, pulling some screenshots. I came across that there was a couple of controversies about Willow Smith, and that how she was in a video at age 12 where she was being completely sexualized. And I watched the video, and it's completely inappropriate, where she's basically in an adult relationship with a boy that looks like he's like 15, 16, maybe even a little bit older. Totally inappropriate for a girl that age to be in that type of video. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But then I guess there was another controversy where she wore an inappropriate t-shirt. Again, all these things are used to not only program us, but to create buzz, to create controversies, where celebrities are doing things that are going to say, hey, everybody look at me. They'll tweet something controversial, or they'll say something controversial, or they'll wear something controversial. In the age of sensationalism that has become the internet world, the world of the cyber reality, where people are completely overstimulated and they have limited attention spans, you have to do something to create buzz. And we see this happening time and time again. And now you see this happening not only with Jaden Smith, but Willow Smith as well. So there's two things going on. And here's this sort of ritualistic behavior, this ritualistic sacrifice that Will Smith is doing, where his children now, his son's wearing a dress, his daughter is this 12-year-old girl who's being thrown into the sacrificial fire. She not only is in this inappropriate video for a 12-year-old girl, but then she's wearing inappropriate clothing. And then I found this other thing that was very controversial, where she was pictured with a 17-year-old boy and she's like 13 years old. Now, I've talked about this quite extensively in my videos, that I worked as a counselor with sex offenders and sexually reactive kids. I did this over a period of 13 years. I have a master's degree in counseling, and I have a great deal of experience working with people who have been sexually abused and recognizing sexually abusive patterns. And anybody in this field would say that this is inappropriate. This is sexual. This girl has been sexually offended by acting out this type of behavior. This music video and these pictures that she is in is basically child pornography. It's putting a child who's not ready to handle this type of energy into situations that are complete sexual in nature. She's being sexualized. It's a form of sexual abuse. It's not as bad as maybe molestation or rape, but it's still sexual abuse. I think one of the things that most people don't know, especially most young people, is that a 12-year-old cannot give their consent. A 13-year-old cannot give their consent. A 14-year-old cannot give their consent. A 15-year-old cannot give their consent. And legally, in most states, even a 16 and 17-year-old can't give their consent for sexual activity with an older person. Now, you see this time and time again in all of these treatment centers that I worked in, and within the criminal justice system. There'll be some real hardcore sex offenders. At the treatment centers I worked in, there was real hardcore sex offenders that already had 20 or 30 victims. They targeted young children. They were addicted to this type of behavior. It's a horrible, horrible thing, and it gets passed on. It gets passed on from generation to generation. Then there are kids in these treatment centers that they were maybe 16 or 17 years old, and they had a girlfriend who was 15 or 14, and they are considered sex offenders as well, even though it's a much different situation. And the girl who's 14 or 15, at least to her mind and to her boyfriend's mind, is consenting to have sex with him. And oftentimes there was some coercion involved or some pressure, peer pressure, so it wasn't such a cut and dry type situation. But this is what we're talking about. And when you're talking about young children, they're not ready to handle this, and they shouldn't be. But in our hypersexualized system that we have now, where so much sex is out there and all of the media and all these kids grow up on it, they're already been sexually offended and seeing videos like this video that Will Smith's daughter put out there. And that's not even fair to the girl, because she didn't make this video and she couldn't consent to making this video. The consent had to come from her parents. She's only 12 years old. She wasn't able to work. She can't be put in that kind of situation without her parents' consent. She can't sign a contract. They have to okay this. They okayed this video. They've okayed everything that's going on here. And you think about Will Smith, or this imaginary brand of Will Smith and his wife, they seem very like really good people. They seem like they're really moral. They seem like they're loving parents. But what parent would do this? What father would do this? Would put his girl in a video like that? Imagine putting your 12-year-old daughter, if you have children, in a video like this that was going to be seen by millions of people, or just being in that situation. Or what if your 13-year-old daughter was laying in bed with a 17-year-old boy? What would you think about that? How would you react emotionally? And all of these things he's permitting. All of these things him and his wife are permitting because they're owned by the Illuminati, because he's wore a dress for the Illuminati. He's done the Illuminati hand signals. He's in full costume with Illuminati type symbolism all over him. He's got the capstone to the pyramid with the all-seeing eye in the middle of it on his forehead while he's wearing a dress. So he's completely owned. Him and his wife are completely owned. They don't have a choice about this. They don't have a choice about these inappropriate videos that his daughter's been in, or these inappropriate pictures that have been taken of his daughter. It's so inappropriate that Child and Protective Services interviewed Will and Jada Smith. And this is another piece that I realized, that with Will and Jada Smith, the girl took Willow Smith, and the boy took the mother's name, Jada Smith, and they turned her name into Jaden. So there you even have this weird sort of where the boy and the girl are switching roles within the family, each person representing the opposite sex from their parents. It's just kind of a bizarre thing to be playing out. Again, everything's scripted. What you name your kids, everything that you do is told to you. This is the kind of control we're talking about in these Hollywood scenarios. And the people that are in public life, you no longer have a public life. Your life is controlled on every level. This is the kind of sickness that we live in today's society. Before I move on to Bruce Jenner, I want to talk about some of the other prevalent transgender news. All of this happened within a 2-week period. I haven't really paid much attention to this issue since making the videos, the A-list actors, the Joan Rivers video, and the video about Michelle Obama. Kind of wanted to get away from it. I made one follow-up video that was mostly about transhumanism, but I really didn't want to have to go through this all the time. I didn't want to spend my time looking at female celebrities, male to female ratio of their fingers, their index fingers and their ring fingers, and I didn't want to have to Google every male actor and look up whether they're wearing a dress in a movie or not. I just kind of wanted to move on. But this thing came up with John Wayne, and then during this 2 week period that culminated with this Bruce Jenner interview, there was a great deal of information of transgender stories that all of a sudden came appearing out of nowhere. I guess that they're there all the time, but I was more paying attention to them. I was more looking for them while I was thinking about making this movie. And I just wanted to say that I probably scan the news for about half an hour every day. A lot of it is done on Facebook, where I have a lot of Facebook friends that post things about alternative news. And then I look at the national news a little bit here and there, and that's about it. Then I'll pull some screenshots, and once in a while I'll come across something while I'm making a video. Most or all of these videos are created very organically based on my spiritual practice and things that just sort of draw my attention, and I feel like I'm being shown something and I need to make a video. Through my spiritual connections or through my spiritual practice, through on a heart-based level, on a godly connection, I'm being ordered, I'm being shown a pattern, and from that pattern I'm supposed to make a video. That's why there's a lot of wide-ranging subject matter that I make videos on, because they're not really about my particular interest. There's things that just draw my attention, things I'm being directed to. I'm going to make a whole video about this. I feel like it's fairly interesting, and it's something that, as I've done it more and more over the years, if I followed this practice, my wife is following as well. I know other people that follow it. It changes your whole orientation towards life, where you're guided from within. And it's a very interesting process. So whenever I start making these videos and then I'm directed towards something and I concentrate on it, it's just that everything falls in my lap that I need to know. All the information I need to know. I don't have to do much research. It just becomes a very easy process. It's something like you're following God's path and God's providing you the way. A lot of people live this way. They follow spirit, they opt for a mystical type lifestyle, and then they're connected to this other levels of existence, these more subtle levels of existence that have been well documented through many spiritual and religious teachings throughout the world over the historical period, the spiritual historical period. And it's very interesting, and I had this very interesting thought, that if you went to the average psychologist or the average psychiatrist and you said to them, you know what, I'm having conversations, or I'm hearing things from within, I'm meditating and I'm getting inspired and I feel like I'm connecting to interdimensional beings, I bet 9 times out of 10 they'll tell you there's something wrong with you. If you're channeling something, or they're going to say that you have a disorder of the mind, it's all imagination, they might put you on medication. But now, with this onset of the transgender movement, if you say, yeah, I'm a boy, but I feel like there's a woman inside of me trying to get out, they'll say, oh, you're perfectly healthy. That's just great. So you see where there's this double standard for what they believe in or what they think is appropriate based on whatever they're told. There's no real science. There's no real integrity in the psychiatric community and the psychological world, because it's been well documented that people have connected to the spirit world, but even believing in God is now becoming pathologized. You're believing in this imaginary being. But if you're born a certain sex and you feel like that you're the opposite sex, that's considered completely healthy behavior. And so we see this time and time again. So here's one of the stories that came to me while I was doing this research, while I was putting together this video. And here's this transgender teen from South Carolina. If any of you have been to South Carolina, it's maybe the most conservative state, one of the most conservative states in the country. And this transgender teen is now allowed, or is the judge forced the motor vehicle department, the DMV, to allow him to be photographed in full makeup. And there's this word they're using where I came across a lot of in these transgender articles, and that is that the person's in transition. that they're making this transition from the sex they were born into the sex that they really are. And you're supposed to call these persons a she if it's a man thinking he's a woman, even though he's biologically still a man, and you know he's biologically still a man, it's politically correct to call the person a she. And this makes me a little uncomfortable because it's basically we all have to be pulled into their deception, just like we have to agree with the 9/11 type lies all the time. You're in these social situations. It's not really appropriate to talk about 9/11 truth. You might be with an older person. You might be with people that are just not ready to handle it. There's lots of times where you're not able to talk about these types of things, but you're expected to nod and smile and go along. Basically lie and betray yourself. And even in these governmental type situation where you're supposed to, you just know that if you say, yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist, or I believe that 9/11 is an inside job, you're going to run into trouble. So we're always expected to compensate for other people's problems and their delusions and the things that they believe are completely false. But in terms of our world, in terms of our reality, we're being pathologized. So here you have a state government that's being forced to recognize this person as something that they are not. They were born a man, and now they're thinking that they are a woman. And again, I've talked about how this is a horrible, horrible thing. That somebody, for whatever reason that they are trapped believing that they are the opposite sex. Whatever this is a genetic thing, or this is a spiritual thing, or this is something carried over from a previous existence in a past life or something. I don't know. I don't know why this stuff goes on, but I think it's probably pretty horrible for these people to have to live with this, to feel trapped in the body of someone of the opposite sex. So I'm not in any way disparaging these people, but I think that it's something that's a disorder of some kind. It's some kind of mental illness. It's not something that's obviously natural or normal. They would be born being congruent with who they are. If they were a boy, they would be congruent with that sex. That's what there would be a balance between what they really are physically and who they felt like they were on a interpersonal level, on an ego level, in terms of their internal world. Their internal world would match their outer world, and I have no idea why this has happened. It's happened for thousands of years. I know this is going back way into religious stories. I can talk about this later in a future video. So this isn't something that just has happened with some sort of chemical type poisoning. Maybe it's more prevalent today. I have no idea what this is about. Again, I have a complete compassion for these types of people. But for the rest of us, we can't be expected to pretend that this is something normal and natural, because it isn't. We all have problems. We all have psychological problems. We all have issues. We all can't just say, this is all normal. Murdering people is normal. This is normal. We all have things we have to work on. We all have things we have to overcome. And then we have to look at society as a whole and what's important for carrying on the human species. So again, these transgender people aren't really a threat to anybody on their own. They're people who are confused. They're people who have this imbalance between who they are in the outer world and who they are internally. And maybe there are things that can be done for them that's effective. And I have no problems with them having sex change operations. These are things that I'm not against. But again, it's the belief. It's having to basically be politically correct and basically say that this thing isn't an aberration when it clearly is. It's something that there's just something wrong here. There's something that's off in the human species that this is happening. And now, for whatever reason, the powers that be are trying to force this down everybody's throat. And then there was a second article about this male model who used to be a female and now is a bodybuilder and was posing topless and on some exercise magazine. So again, this is something that's being brought to our awareness all the time. I noticed that there's an article, there's stuff about this all the time. If you really look for it, I'm sure you would find that they are always trying to tell you, they're always trying to tell the next generation, the children that are growing up, that this is natural and normal. So you got to think about this. And that brings us to Bruce Jenner, which to me is the culmination of everything in this video and everything that's going on with this agenda, with this ritualistic type behavior. This interview that Bruce Jenner did and all the coverage that's gotten, you can clearly see how it's all tied together. Okay, so I just saw a few clips of the interview. I've never watched the Kardashian show. I really don't know very much about it. I know that Bruce Jenner married Kim Kardashian's mother, I believe, and then he's had a couple of kids with her, and he's part of this reality TV show. I have seen pictures of him over the years, and I was like, wow, he looks a lot like a woman now. So I think I saw a picture of him like 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember Bruce Jenner from when I was a kid, because I went to the 1976 Olympics with my dad. I went to the track and field events, and I actually saw Bruce Jenner win a gold medal. So I was a kid when he was a very popular, a very powerful athlete, a very powerful male figure. And then some 30 years later, I see a few pictures of him. I'm like, wow, he looks a little bit effeminate. He's really thin. He used to be a very big, bulky guy. So I even before that this thing came out that he was a transgender person, I said he looks kind of like he's been effeminized in some way. And then he gave this interview. I saw the clips. He looks very much like a woman. He talks very much like a woman. You could either very easily mistake him for a woman, and he hasn't had the gender surgery. I forget what they call it now. Something like sex reassignment surgery. I don't know if he's getting hormone replacements now. He's getting estrogen. I don't know exactly what he's getting, but he's clearly being turned into a woman, and he's supposedly choosing this. But if you go back to Bruce Jenner when he was in the Olympics, he was a very powerful male athlete. He had all the power it takes to win the decathlon, and you have to be an incredible athlete to compete in that event. It's 10 different track and field events. It used to be considered, you were considered the greatest athlete in the world when you won the decathlon because it took so much athletic ability. And it's a multi-million-dollar organization. And now it's multi-trillion-dollar, even probably $1 billion when I was a kid. So it's something that people from all over the world, there was a lot of high-level athletes competing for this gold medal. And he was the best in the entire world. He was the best at this in the entire world. Now, I used to play basketball. I talk about this a little bit. I'm 6'1". I used to be able to dunk a basketball. I was a pretty good outside shooter. I could dribble the ball well. And at some point in my basketball career, and I really worked on my game, I played 4 or 5 hours of basketball in urban parks, at inner city parks, and I worked on drills, I worked on skill sets, and I wanted to play at the Division One level. I was trying to walk on for this Division One team. I had a pretty good chance of making the team, but at some point I realized that there were thousands of basketball players just like me or better than me, and then there was thousands of basketball players that played my same position who were really a lot better than me. I went to my nephew's, he was at the 5-star basketball camp, and this is where a lot of the great basketball players, Division One, future Division One high school basketball players used to go. I know now there's like Nike camps, these other camps, but they used to go there to be recruited. So this is the cream of the crop. And I watched the All-Star game. I watched the All-Star game at this basketball camp, and these kids who were 3 or 4 years younger than me were so much better, and a lot of them were bigger and better athletes. And I realized, wow, the competition level to play basketball is really out of this world, and the level of sacrifice and training and things I would have to do to make up this gap now that I was an older person was basically impossible. And even after that, I still wouldn't have been the best basketball player in the world. I never would have been the best basketball player in the world with all that work and all that commitment. So then you have this situation where Bruce Jenner in 1976 was the greatest decathlon person, the greatest decathlete in the entire world. And if you understand the kind of commitment and the kind of internal commitment and the kind of confidence you need for that and the kind of mental toughness you need for that to compete on that level, you have to be all in. You can't be somebody who thinks that they're a woman. Are you trying to tell me that this guy, this big muscular powerful man that won the decathlon was really thinking that he was a woman during all of these races, during the shot put? Imagine the self-doubt, the incongruity he would have had. You have to be congruent as a person. You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe in yourself to be successful on that level, even to be an Olympic athlete. You can't be torn. You can't be someone who thinks that they're a woman, that is living a lie, who's torn internally. There's no way that could happen. We're talking about the highest levels of athletic competition. And so that just didn't happen. He wasn't thinking he was a woman back then. I don't know what's happened between now and then, but I have a few ideas. I'll get to those in just a second, but there's actually more than this. He was married to three different women and had two children with each of these women. So between the time that he married Kim Kardashian's Kim Kardashian's mother, he had two previous wives and had two children with them. And he was still this big athlete going around doing endorsements, doing guest appearances. There's a huge market, a big money market for these retired athletes. They show up and they sell stuff. Basically, they're learning to be actors, or they're a part of this commercial agenda. They're part of this grand illusion I talked about Will Smith and his family being a part of. And then he gets into this reality TV show. He has two more children with Kim Kardashian's mother, so he has six children altogether. And up until this point, he apparently is all man. He is somebody who is not having any problems, at least on the outside, that anybody can see. And he's not somebody who's incongruent between his inner world, where he believes he's a man, and his outer world, where he is actually a man. So he can try to walk that back, and they can try to walk this back and pretend that he knew his whole life and was hiding it, but there's just no way. So this is something that's happened recently. Is he the same person? Is he a clone? Has he had some sort of MK Ultra mind control type scenario where they split his personality into alters, and maybe that's something. Maybe he was somebody all along. He was a product of some sort of genetic mutation, of some sort of mind control type situation, and he had alter egos, and he had this alter ego where he was a woman, and then all of a sudden he's on this reality show where he's very well known from this reality show. This reality show appears to be full with transvestites. When I look at some of the pictures of those girls, I'm wondering how many of them were actually born men or have had some sort of testosterone type situation, enhanced testosterone levels in utero for some reason or another, or they were, God knows what they are. I mean, this is just such a bizarre thing that I'm talking about here. It's just such a bizarre world that we live in. But here's Bruce Jenner, and all of a sudden, when he's this popular figure, he goes through this very public transformation, and now he's going to have his own reality TV show, and all these celebrities and all these people are tweeting how brave he is and how great this is, and he can be who he truly is, and how normal and natural this is. And so there's this agenda, and this is a ritual that's playing itself out for everybody, and you can see all the pieces that were put into place so this thing can be rolled out, just like all the things that you learned about the Al-Qaeda and how much we were programmed for the Al-Qaeda. So when 9/11 happened, I did this. I didn't know it was an inside job when it happened. And when these planes hit, how many of us said, oh, Al-Qaeda did it? Practically everybody said that. And so now that people are starting to wake up, you can see, well, this thing with Jaden Smith and all of these male actors who are being rolled out and having to wear, be in drag and have to wear women's clothing and be in women's roles. Well, we have been slowly conditioned for this because this is all a big experiment. I talk about this quite extensively. I have a very long chapter in my book, The Choice, about this. How America is just an experiment. They're just messing with us. They can see what they're doing. Maybe it's some alien agenda, these extraterrestrial presence, and they're just completely messing with demonic people, demonic beings that are completely messing with us, trying to figure out what they can do to us, what we'll believe, how we react to certain situations, like mice going through a maze, and they're constantly changing the stimuli, they're constantly changing the information, the world around us, and now they're completely messing with our sexual identity on top of the GMO foods, on top of the poisons in the water, on top of the electromagnetic poisoning, on top of the radioactivity, on top of the subliminal messaging. Now that they're messing with our sexual identity. So I also saw that there was somebody posted that there was a video clip from the Family Guy where the character Stewie 6 years ago outs Bruce Jenner as a transgender person. Again, the Family Guy has been involved with the Robin Williams death. Also, they predicted the Boston bombing. A few other things. There was that famous predictive programming with the Simpsons, a couple things there. One of them was 9/11. Bunch of stuff. I can't even remember it all. Probably a lot of you guys remember that more than I do. But again, here it is, predictive programming. So they already knew this was going to happen. They knew Bruce Jenner was going to do this, and they've rolled this out. So everybody's involved in this ritual. It was a highly rated interview, something that everybody's talking about. It's blowing up on Twitter. It's becoming trendy. Then there's going to be this reality TV show, and slowly this has been worm-tongued into our existence, where now transgender type activity, transgender type people, this is a normal behavior. This is something that just happens. There's all these people that are born male or they're born female, but internally they're a different sex. And this is completely natural and normal. This is part of the design. This is part of God's plan, that we can all be a part of this horror show where we're born one sex, but we feel internally that we're something else. So there's this thing that can happen to people, which is a pretty horrible thing. It's just natural behavior. It's just something that happens to folks. And if you say anything different, if you point out that this seems a little bit aberrant or it's unnatural, even if you do it in a non-hateful way, if you do it in a compassionate way, you do it in a loving way, you're a homophobe, you're a prejudiced person, you're a bad person, you get shouted down, you're a racist. If you say 9/11's an inside job, you're a terrorist, you're anti-American, you're unpatriotic. You can see this incredible unnatural web that they're tying together, that they're weaving here, where all of these lies are being wrapped around us like we're being cocooned and ready to have all the juices sucked out of us by the giant spider in the Lord of the Rings. It's a very slippery slope that we're sliding down. So what this is all about, and I talk about this quite extensively in other videos, how all of this is about trying to sever our connection to the divinity within us. And this is really about how, like, if you go to a public school, all the attention is put on the kids having the most problems. The kids who are psychologically disturbed or have various behavioral challenges, and all the gifted and talented people, all the people that could be potentially great and could help lead humanity to a higher level, are left neglected. And on a spiritual level, people who are spiritual, who are seeking to better themselves, to improve their characters, to connect to God, to live godly lives and be the best people they could possibly be, people that could actually illuminate the world. And we talk about the Illuminati being this incomplete lie, how the Illuminati want to keep everybody in darkness. But for the people who can really illuminate the world, the people who can love on such a high level, who can love God on such a high level and love everybody and spread their love throughout the human population, and can really enlighten their fellow human beings, help raise the bar, help raise the level of spiritual attainment for the whole world, are being basically shouted down. They're pathologized. They're considered mad because they believe in God, this imaginary being. They're psychologically pathologized. And then these people who are really disordered are being celebrated, are being put on the pinnacle of human achievement. How brave you are, how great you are, how wonderful this is. And all of these sellouts and all these people have sold their souls are acting out this type of scenario for everyone to see, so they can bring humanity down to the lowest possible level that we can be. It's something that's incredibly maddening. We live in such a mad world. Alright, so that's enough for this video. I have another follow-up video to the 95% chance Michelle Obama is a man. I have some information about that I'm going to clue people into. I got a couple other videos to make, but that's enough for now.